Originally in Spanish. Exact date unknown.
You told us that sometimes you get lost when you jump between timelines. Why?
This can be better explained with spatial frequency maps. Remember that each place is a frequency, but it also has another variable of when in that place. Not because it has a progression, but because the progression depends on the observer. The numerical variable of the place can be interpreted as fixed, while the temporal variable is not fixed. It advances, but the speed of advancement varies with the observer. However, for a spacecraft, both variables are combined into a single sequence of numbers. Let's say that the number 56 is the place. 78 is the temporal variable of the place. So we have the number 5678, which is a place with its temporal variable, when in that place. Then, if it progresses, we would see this. 5678, 5679, 5680, 5681, etc., where 56 remains as a base, but the progression of when advances. And no matter how fast it advances, according to the observer, the number 5680 will always be 5680, which is an exact address in time and space. And you can always guide a ship to 5680. Once there, how fast it advances will depend on the observer. The progression of time depends on the observer's state of mind. The timeline could be defined with the number 6 of 56, where 5 remains stable and 6 can become 5 or 7 or 8. It is still the same place, but a different line. Thus, 5780 is the same place in space-time as 5680, but on another timeline. Every time a ship jumps, it records where it was and where it is going. That way, it can always return. The problem here is that, in this example, I am only using 4 digits, whereas ships use thousands of digits with thousands of variables, or microvariables. There it is no longer so easy to record where you were and where you are going. You jump many times, and the result is that, if you are not extremely careful, you do not return to where you started. Because this is also a very linear description of reality, but what happens is that it also moves in other ways with other dimensions that are more difficult to describe. So there is a progression, or the frequencies slip towards unexplored space-time directions, losing the cruise. That's why they leave crop circles, for example, which is a low-tech solution to check that you're on the right path home. That is, with the base number 5680, 5 equals fixed place, 6 equals timeline, 8 equals position in time, 0 equals position in time with even greater precision. But from there, the progression of dimensions progresses toward complex forms. It becomes an extremely complex space-time matrix that is not stable or fixed. An image to describe this great complexity could be this. In other words, the fact that a ship records where it has been and where it is going at all times makes it easy to think that it records everything so you don't get lost. Looking at things simply, that's how it is. If the ship was at 5680 and then jumps to 4390 and then to 3481, since it has 5680 in its memory, it can always jump back there. In theory, and in basic star navigation practice, such as for a cargo or commercial ship, that's how it works. There's not much science involved. The problem arises when you start making large temporal jumps. Because even if you record 5680 and then jump to 234,897 and then to 49,817 and want to return to 5,680, it turns out that 5680 is no longer there because there are densities or staggered timelines of even greater complexity. In other words, it's like another even more complicated level. Having been at 234,897 and 49817, the reference 5,680 no longer corresponds because it's from another level of the timeline. In other words, there are timelines within timelines within timelines. And what for you is home at 5,680 From another timeline, 5680 is not where you wanted to return. Because there are more variables of complexity here. It is no longer so simple if you start to move the time variables.
Complementary chat with Athena's Varu.
We have discussed time travel, which basically involves matching frequencies. The origin and destination have an energy map. So how are these time travelers supposed to travel? I imagine they make it all up because it doesn't work by assigning dates, especially knowing that all dates are false.
Something like that, yes. Traveling by dates would only work if you have the frequency number on the frequency map itself. In other words, if you have the connection between the date and that number representing a frequency. And in my experience, all the dates are false. They don't correspond. You can mathematically calculate what frequency number a date should have based on the relationship between other dates and their already known frequencies, but they never correspond. And that's not a mathematical problem. The problem is that the dates are wrong. They should correspond with mathematical accuracy, but they don't. The history as they tell it and in what sequence is a lie, 100% corroborated by us here. It's a pity we can't prove it to the public.
Shouldn't the mathematical frequency calculation to which you can attribute a date for time travel be based on the number 12?
Preferably, but still in base 10. The dates and their calculations do not match. Excerpt of the chat with Yazhi, 2021. Aneeka said in one of the videos that old matrix, 5D included, is numerical, and if you know how it works, so you can control it, that's why you can insert stuff into it, etc. Question is, if 5D is numerical too, and the matrix, how do you know that in your reality there isn't something manipulated in the same way by another race who manipulates numerically? Because if 3D matrix can be manipulated, so can 5D too, no? Answer. Because we know the numerical value of the reality we are in here. So any external manipulation would show up in our instruments. Interferometers. Why numerical? But first, remember I no longer see reality in terms of Ds, 3D, 4D, 5D, etc. I see one bulk. And whatever divides them is the mind of the observer. And there would be as many realities and densities as there are observers. So there are as many Ds as observers are. So in my newest model, there no longer are densities as such. So no use calling Earth 3D or here 5D. It depends on the awareness of each person. So having said that, there is no difference in numerical values in what was called 3D and what is called 5D or whatever D. But the reason it has a numerical value is not as in pixels in a computer screen, but in a numerical energy value per unit of relative space. That is a frequency map as represented in a space frequency map exactly. So that's why there is a numerical value for everything, for every place. because it is represented by numbers that hold a meaning in a scale of power, volume, and vibration of that energy. So you can modify those values, imposing others with a technological device, tractor beam or portal, inserting or removing anything in your gadget's power from reality. In the case of 3D humans, they have no way of noticing such an insertion or deletion. But the TAYGETANs, among others, do have the technology to insert, delete, therefore to detect any other race playing tricks on them.
Wow, okay. So the other races, they all do have this technology, and that's why they can't be manipulated this way as humans on Earth can.
Yes, humans have no idea what the heck I'm talking about, much less the capacity to do it. As mentioned before, it is the technology and knowledge to create matter out of potential energy. That is way ahead of Earth's best technology, even the hidden from the public one.
Okay, continuing with this for a moment, have you considered that maybe there is some race out there that perfected this technology beyond even yours so as to make any manipulations undetectable?
I can't see how. I may even go as far as saying it cannot be so. Yet, I'm open to the possibility.